But yeah. So interestingly enough, I was looking over. I was like, what what did I want to talk about? And in looking through, I found an interesting trend that were because I remember before we went on our hiatus, they were doing a Kickstarter for a board game version of Deadly Premonition, which looked interesting. And then I started to look, and I'm like, there's a whole bunch of, when you sit there and you look at it, of actual video games that they've made board games out of. And I've actually found 4. So the Deadly Premonition is one. They've actually done 2 separate board games on Dark Souls, which is interesting. One a card game and one an actual miniatures game, which I've heard the miniatures game is insane. And the one that just recently came out with, they just came out with Call of This War of Mine. And in looking at one of the reviews for This War of Mine, the board game, they literally, like one of the reviewers said, like he played the board game, he had never heard of the video game, and then got the video game because he played the board game. And he's like, I just wanted to see if there was any differences. And he says that, man, it is the best conversion of a video game down to a board game. And he says the way that they did it is when you play, you have a board that looks like the house that you build up, the colony that you build up in the video game version of it. And you can expand and do that. But instead of you playing as one of the characters, everybody at the table plays cooperatively, and you can move around the different characters in the building. So what's really interesting that he said is when you, at night, the night phase of the game, you can decide to send people out to go do side missions. And then based on these like cards that are there, they have numbers on them, and it has this book that, depending on what happens, you look up in this book the numbers, and it gives you a little dialogue box of what can happen. And then you have to make a decision, and based on your decision is what your rewards are. And he sat there and he's like, I've played this game about 3 or 4 times. He's like, it's not a happy ending type of board game. He's like, it is just like the computer game where you have to make some tough decisions. And your decisions, like, things happen based on that. And he sat there and said, like, it's just like in the video game. Like, you go to this like building that shows up, and you end up finding out that there's this little elderly couple that's hiding out in this building, but they got a stockpile of food. And your option is like, leave the food there so that they can survive, or do you steal the food so that you guys can survive? And it's really interesting because I remember in the video game, I got that same scenario. Like I came into this house and I heard sound, and then I looked through the keyhole and I saw this little elderly couple, and I'm like, well, I wonder what would happen. And then like I ended up opening the door, and the little elderly guy, I thought I was gonna have to fight him. He's just like, no, with like, you take whatever you want, but leave for us, and blah blah blah. And it was just this like sad moment of like, do I take the food so that my people don't starve, but then this little old couple here is going to starve, or do I just leave it for them and then I'll just go do another like side? Like, it really like questions your moral judgment.
What'd you end up doing?
I ended up actually, what did I do? I think I ended up like, I only took like 1 or 2 bits of food, and I left the rest there, like just enough that like my people wouldn't go starving. But it was like this, like I was ready to like, all right, look at all this food, and then like I see this little old guy, I'm like, I can't do this, like this is not right, And it was just like, I've never played a game that literally made me question what one of my decisions would be. Like, it was such an impactful thing, and it was like, wow, like you never really think of these things. But they say like the board game is exactly like that. So like you have a tiredness, a hunger, and I think a thirst. And depending on what you do, like it has different levels of how it goes. So what's interesting is that everybody starts on all 3 of those on level 1. And what happens is for however many spaces you have open, whatever the least amount you have, that's how many actions you have that turn. So obviously, as you get more thirsty, as you get more hungry, you have less actions that you can do per your turn. And then you can sit there and get food and feed the person, and it lowers down your hunger, your thirst, and all that stuff. And you're tired, like you have to have them sleep. And it's really interesting on this mechanic that they did. He's like, you find yourself kind of like doing this like juggling game of like, okay, who needs to sleep, who needs to eat, who needs to drink, and all this stuff, just like in the video game of it. To the point where it's gotten me interested. Like I would like to like find somebody that would have it and just play it just to see what it's like.